Alright, hey everyone, this is an introduction to episode 2 and what we're going to be doing in this episode. So in this episode is going to be focused on data loading and adding in the basic services such as, let's go over here, such as our data service, our money service, and our plot system. So you'll notice that whenever I join the game, I get assigned to a plot from 1 to 6 based on how many players in the game. And you'll see that if I click on these buttons, you'll see that we get teleported to our corresponding areas. And let's say, for example, we want to give ourselves money. We can go over here and open our DataLoaded function, and we can say task.delay, maybe 2 seconds. We want to give ourselves like maybe, let's say 500, and we want to wait another extra 3 seconds, give ourselves another 1000, wait another 1 second, give ourselves, let's say 100. So if you play the game, and wait for our data load, you'll see that there's an animation to when we get money, like so. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And I'm going to show you how to do all of those, and hope y'all enjoy the video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. Alright, welcome to episode 2 of the How to Make a Grow Garden game. So today I'll be showing y'all how to save data, load data, basically just data stores in general, and how to actually make your plot load. Or for example, you see right here, you have an empty garden, and whenever you load in, it'll randomly assign one of these gardens for you. So yeah, let's get into it. But the main thing I want to note is that if you, let's say you say print hi out here, the moment you require this module for the first time, this function will run. So I'm going to require this first, so if anything outside of a function is there, it'll run first before everything else. And then after that, I'm going to say for underscore comma ModuleScript. And cachedModules do. And of course, this is going to be like the name, so module name, because you see how we store the dictionary right here, which is our index is our module name, which corresponds to this. And the actual required module is this. So now we can say if ModuleScript.init, then ModuleScript.init with the functions like so. So we're saying that, okay, if this module has a function called init, then we'll want to run that function, which is going to load everything that the init function has to do with. So that's going to work. And now for me, I'm just going to call this DataService. And instead of calling this local module and then returning the module, we can say local service, which is just for me, or just organization purposes. And then we can say function service.init. So. And then now you see we have our profile store that we added in earlier. So we can move this into our data service like so. And I want to note that remember GetChildren only returns the immediate children of the folder, not the nested folders, which is what we want in this case. And now we can get the profile service, profile store. So local profile store is equal to require script.profile store. And then we also want to get the player service. Now, before we actually save our data, we want to actually enable the data saving. So we go to game settings and go to security. We want to turn enable studio access to API services, which it just tells you it enables data stores and things like that. So we're just going to turn this on too. And yeah, there we go. Now if we go back to our script, we can start making it to where the player's data loads whenever they join the game. So we can say something like players.playerAdded, connect function, player. And then we can make a function called, let's say, local function PlayerAdded. Player, like so. And instead of just calling the function like so in here, we can remove all of that and we can just say PlayerAdded, like so. And of course, if there are already players in the server before this function actually runs, we can say for underscore comma player, player in next, or player in players, get players do, player added, player. And of course, if you have a player added function, you also want to have a player remove function. So we can say connect player removed, and we can make a player remove function up here. So now, if we look in the tutorial, this is sort of all of the code that we want for loading the player data. So you see that there's a profile template, which in this case, we just want to make another module in here called data template, or we can just call this template, like so. And then we can say local template equals this and return the template. And this is going to hold all of our template data that we want the player to have. So for example, we want them to have something called Sheckles, which let's say make it like 0. And we want them to have inventory stuff, like so. Which we want it to be a table. And let's see if there's anything else we want. Yeah, that should be good for now, for our basic data. And then we want to get the profile template. So local profile template equals require script.template. And now we want to just, let's see, we're going to copy all of these things, so profile and things like that. And we're just going to change the variable names to match it, so profile template. And yeah, that should be good. And then let's see. So you notice that they have the whole local function player added thing right here. So you're gonna just want to copy everything in here, like so. And there we go. So let me remove all these comments for now, because typically this is going to be exactly how you're going to load data for every single one of your games if you're using ProfileStore. So yeah, and then we can say players like so, and players. All right, and then you'll see that they have an example here for when the player actually has all of your data loaded. So in this case, we just want to remove this and let's add a comment here saying player data successfully loaded, like so. And here we just want to set the attribute for the player to something called player set attribute, maybe data loaded. So this is going to be universally accepted. And what I mean by that is the client can see this value and the server can see this value. So in the GUI, we can say something like, okay, we can want to wait until the player's attribute or the player has an attribute called data loaded. All right, so now that's done. Let's see, let's print the player data so we can make sure that our data is actually there. And that should be good. And now we also want to check whenever the player is leaving the game. So we can copy this code right here and copy and paste in there. And that should be good. Oh, another thing. Instead of saying keeping the profiles out here, we can keep it in our services. Like so. So we can say profiles is equal to this. And then we can say, let's do this. And let's see. Alright, yeah, we'll just keep it like this. This is fun. Because all of this is just extra things for annotating, things like that, which we don't really need. So, there we go. And let's see. We also want to replace profiles with server.profiles, or service.profiles, like so. And there we go. That should be good. So, if we play the game... Oh, let's see what happened here. HTTP set sync. Let's see. Okay, all of our services are enabled. Let's see what the issue is. Oh, okay, there we go. I guess it just was a normal Roblox issue. Alright, so now you see that profile loaded for Senko, which is my name. And you'll see that we have our data, like so. Now, you might be wondering, how can we actually replicate this data to our client GUI that we have? So, this is first off, we want to change this to just player.name, like so. And there we go. So, in order to replicate the data, we want to create remote events, which, as mentioned before, just sort of acts as a way to communicate from the server to client or the client to server, vice versa. So we want to make a folder called remotes. And in this remote event, we want to say update Sheckles, like so. Now we want to actually get this remotes folder and make it into a variable. So we can say remotes replicator_remotes. And then here we want to just replicate our Sheckles value. So remotes.updateSheckles fire client. And then we can say what client we want to actually fire it to. What you can see is our player. So we want to fire it to the player. Alright, so in order to make this sort of easier to understand, we can just make a function here called DataLoaded, which, hence the name, handles whenever our player data has been loaded. So we can just copy this and we can add it to our DataLoaded function. So DataLoaded player, we can say local profile equals service.profiles player. We can say if we found the profile, then we just want to replicate all of our data, like so. So let's just comment these real quick. DataLoaded, PlayerRemoved, like so. Alright, so now our data should be updated. So in here, we can just make a local script called client. And we can just call this, or instead we can just call this Sheckles updater, like so. And then we want to start an on-client listener. So we'll get the remotes. And once again, you notice I'm doing wait for child because sometimes the folders don't load on the client first, but however on the server, they will always load. So now we can say remotes.updateSheckles.client event, like so. And of course, we want to actually mention what the Sheckles value is. So we can say profile.data.Sheckles, like so. And let's see, that should be good. Now here, we can say Sheckles amount, which is obviously an integer or a number. And now we can reference our Sheckles text label. And we can say local GUI script.parent, local roots, GUI wait for child roots. And then we want to get our Sheckles label, like so. Root.Sheckles. And we can say Sheckles label.text is equal to Sheckles amounts. Our dollar, like so. And now if we play the game, you see that our data or our Sheckles amount is changed based on how much money we have. Alright. And then now let's say we want to increment our Sheckles, right? So we can make another service here called MoneyService, like so. So we can call this MoneyService and we can do local service and then return the service. Alright. And then over here we can say function service dot give, or let's make this sort of like a more broad function name. Let's call this dot giveMoney. Yeah, giveMoney is fun. And of course we want to mention who the target we want to give money to is, and the amounts, which is always going to be a number. Alright. Now we want to get the data service. So in order to do that, we can just require it, like so. Require script.parent.dataService. And then in our data service, we can make a function for easy access called getProfile or getData. And then we can say target, which is going to be a player. And then we can say, oh, it already auto-completed it for us. So we just do that. Otherwise, let's just return no. So it's saying, okay, if we found the profile, then we'll just return the data. Otherwise, we'll return no. And an extra thing we can do is we can say, if not player get attribute, or target, my fault, get attribute. Okay, I see the issue. So you'll notice in DataService, we required MoneyService here, but in MoneyService, we also required DataService in here as well, which Roblox doesn't allow, because you can't require something back and forth like that. So in order to actually combat that, we can first off get rid of this, and we can go over here to our server, and we can say ModuleScript.cachedModules is equal to our cachedModules, like so. And let's see, that should be good. And we want to put this out of the init function, like so. So now in our data service, we can just say add an extra thing called cachedModules, as well as in here. And now we can get our data service. So local data service equals service.cachedModules.dataService. Let's actually name this right. Here we go. And that should work. And in here, you notice we have another issue, and we're just going to do this. .MoneyService. And now that should work. But now we're going to work on our leaderstats. So create a folder in the player called leaderstats. And we also want to create the Sheckles value. So Sheckles is equal to an int value, Sheckles, and we want to make the value 0 for now, and parent it to the leaderstats, like so. And then now, we want to update the Sheckles count. So we can say function service.updateSheckleCount player. And now right over here, we can fire the client like so, or we want to get our profile data first. So we can reference our data service here. Let's copy and paste this like so. Player. And we don't want to set our Sheckles amount, we just want to update it. So we'll just say player and then profile data Sheckles. And we also want to update the leader stats value. So player, find for child leader stats. If leader stats, then we just want to update the value. So leader stats.Sheckles.value is equal to profile data.Sheckles, like so. That should work. So now we can just say service.updateSheckleCount and our new count. So profile data.Sheckles, like so. And here we can also call the updateSheckleCount function here. Whoops, instead of that, we need to change this to target. There we go. Because this needs to be a player, not a amount or a number value. So let's see, that should be good. Let's see, attempt to index no with data loaded. Let's see. Oh, okay. We want to set the cached modules up here because we're setting cached modules after the net function is called, which this doesn't exist yet. So now, if we play the game, you'll notice we have our Sheckles count set to 0. And let's say like maybe after like, for a test, we'll say maybe after like 5 seconds, we want to add around, let's say 100 Sheckles to our balance. So give money, player, 100, like so. And if we play the game, we'll wait 5 seconds. And you'll see that the data is updated, like so. And you notice one thing, it's sort of like bland the way it updates right now. We want it to sort of have like a little tick value as it gradually grows up, or goes up. So in order to do that, we can go to our client like so, And we can create a sort of a mock value. So local mock value instance.new int value. And mock value.name equals mockSheckleCount. Mock value.value is equal to 0. And here we can just change this to whatever our shekels amount is. Alright. So we're going to want to tween this value whenever the shekels count is changed. So we'll make something called tween service, like so. Tween service create mock value. And we want to have sort of a quick transition. So we're going to do this. And then we want to change the value to the actual new shekels amount, like so. I want to play this thing. So we're going to play the tween so the value has a transition, or around a 0.5 transition into the actual amount. So now we can say mock value.change connect function, and we want to just set the value like so. So our mock value.value, and we just want to change it. Okay. Another thing we want to do is, let's say that we play the game, and you'll see that it sort of animates now to 100. But let's see. One thing we do if we reset, you notice that this value doesn't update anymore. We can just go over here and check whenever the leader stats value gets changed, because we already made it into a leader stats. So we can say local leader stats is equal to local player with child leader stats. Column f.huge. We want to put this below the data loaded thing. Alright, now we can say leader stats.sheckles.changed connect function, and we just want to update it. So we can remove this shekels amount right here. We can say leader stats.sheckles.value, like so. And then that'll work. And of course, we just want to actually just update the value normally, like so. And there we go, that should be good. Let's see. Alright, and we can get rid of the remote, the update shekels remote, because we don't really need it anymore. So let's check for update shekels and remove this. Now, if you play the game, let's see. Mock value.value. We need to check. We need to check or change the mock value to whatever our shekels value is first, like so. And there we go. That should be good. Now you see that it works. And then we can go over here to our server and we can go back to our money service and add in, so we can say task.la5 function and just give ourselves money. So you can say player, 1000 or 10,000. And you see, if we play the game and we wait 5 seconds, you notice that the value changes now. It has a sort of animation to it. Alright. Now that we have our money service out of the way, we can actually work on the plot system now. So we can create a service in here called PlotService. Let's call this PlotService, and then local service and return service. Now we can say function or create a function called DataLoaded, which I mentioned earlier. And say player, like so. And in here, we want to get our plot service. Service.cachedModules.plotService. And we can say PlotService.dataLoaded player. And now in our plot service, we can actually assign the player to a plot. So you notice in here we have 6 plots. So we can make a function here called function service.assignPlot. And then we can say player, like so. So when the player's data actually loads, we want to assign them to a plot. So since we have 6 plots, or instead of actually just relying on the 6, we can get the plot count. So you can say service.getPlot, get max plots. And now we can say return workspace.world.map.plots GetChildren. And we do a little number sign, which returns a number instead of a table, which is the number of children inside of the array, which in this case is 6. And then we can loop through it. So we can say for I equals 1 comma get not plots do. We can say corresponding plot dot plots to string I. We can say if corresponding plot get attributes, and we want to make sure this is a model for the annotating. We can say if get attribute taken equals true, then we want to continue. And we want to continue until we have a plot that hasn't been taken yet. So we're going to say return corresponding plot. Like so. And then instead of assign plot, we can say get available plot. So local plot is equal to service.get available plot player. We can say if plot, then we want to set attribute of the plot taken to true. And we want to set the user ID. So we can say plot set attribute owner is equal to our user ID, like so. And let's add a print statement. We can say print player.name comma plots comma plot.name. So now if you play the game, you'll notice that we are automatically assigned to the first slot, which if you go to plots and 1, you see that we are assigned to that, and the other plots haven't been taken yet. So you'll see that this value hasn't been changed yet, and we want this value to be changed based on who owns the plot. So we can go over here and say, you can go open these things and you see player sign, which is just this right here. And we can change the text label to our name, which we can say, which should look like that. So we can say local player sign equals plot.player sign, which we know it's a model. Then we can say player sign.main.textLabel.text is equal to player.name. And of course, we want to change the image label to our icon. So if we go to Roblox, and generally you shouldn't know how to do this from the top of your head. So we have DevForum. So we can say something like how to get player icon Roblox. And you'll notice that okay, we have this right here. We have our useful DevForum thing. And so here we can just copy and paste everything right here, like so. And now we'll say player, and we want to, instead of saying game.players, we want to make it neater. So we'll just get the player service and we'll say players, like so. And now we just want to change the image label to our player's image. Player sign.main surface GUI. Surface GUI image label image is equal to content. Like so. Yep, that's how they do it. And now if you play the game, let's see what this issue is. So you notice that the name changes, but our image hasn't changed yet. So let's see. Yes. Okay. So the image transparency is at 1. So we just want to change this to 0. So player sign.main.surface GUI image label image transparency is equal to 0. So that way it's visible now. Alright, so let's say that the player leaves the game now. So we can say function service dot PlayerRemoved, and we want it to reference the player. And we want to make a function called getPlot, which is our player. Alright, so now we want to loop through all of the plots for underscore comma plot model and workspace.world.map.plots GetChildren do. And we can say if plot get attribute taken equals true and plot get attribute owner is equal to our player's user ID, then we want to clear that plot. So in this case, we just want to set the sign to the default value, which is empty garden, and this transparency to 1. So we can go over here and copy and paste all of these. First off, we can say return plot and return nil. So we can say local found plot, service.getPlot, player. If found plot, then we just want to set all of these attributes. So we can say nil, and we can say owner, comma nil as well. And let's see, right here, we want to change the name to empty garden, like so. And here we want to set the image to nothing, as well as this to 1. And that should be good. So now you notice if we play the game, you see that our plot has been assigned to us. And I also want to note another thing. If you want to test out to see this actually works with multiple players, we can go to our test thing right here and do server and clients, like so. And we want to set this to around 2 players. So now if you play the game, we just want to wait for everything to load. And you'll see that we have our server, which is this right here, and the 2 clients, which should be loading right about now. Alright, so you see that, okay, the data is loading, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. And there we go. You see that we have player 1, which is right here, and player 2, which is over here. And one thing you'll note is that the actual icons aren't loading, which is because typically if you do team test or server and client test, they don't have any icons or any player icons, because their user IDs is always -1, which there is no icon for those. But I just want to note that these work now. So let's say I'm player 2 and I quote unquote leave the game, like so. Oh, let's see what happens. Let's see. Okay, so these plots haven't actually been updated yet. Oh, I know why. That's my fault, I'm kind of stupid for that. So, the reason that doesn't work is because I didn't actually call this PlayerRemoved function. So, in our data service, when we do PlayerRemoved, we can say our PlotService.playerRemoved and player, like so. And that should be good. So now, if we do our 2 tests, our 2 client tests, and wait for these to load. Alright, you'll see that we have player 1 and player 2 over here. And let's say I'm player 1 and I leave the game. You'll see that, okay, it's an empty garden now, which this was player 1, but I still have my garden over here. And that's exactly what we want. Now, the last thing I want to do is when I actually want to make these TP buttons work. So, in here, we can go over here to our image UI, create a script, and we can call this button TPs, which is going to handle all of our TPs. So we'll get our GUI, we'll get our roots, and we want to get the players. We'll get the local player, and we just want to wait until all of our data is loaded. Alright, and now we want to get the TP frame. So we can say garden, TP frame, we can say seeds, TP frame, You can say cell TP frame. Now we can go over here to our garden and get a mouse button one click listener. So we can say garden TP frame dot button to mouse button one click connect function, and we want to get our current plot that we're in. So we can say for underscore comma plot model and workspace dot world dot map dot plots get children do if plots get attribute taken equals true and plots get attribute owner equals our user ID, then we want to teleport here. So we'll return the whole thing so it stops the loop from running, and we want to teleport the character. So we want to reference the character, and we want to get our root part. And we still do wait for child is because we don't know if it's actually loaded yet. So that's why we're doing that. And it's a root part set attribute or sets. Oops, let's change this to base part annotating. I'm gonna say set primary part C frame. Or instead of that, instead of root part, we'll just do character. Character set primary part C frame. And you'll see that it just sets our C frame to wherever you point it to, which we want it to be the CP part right here. So we can say plot.cp part.c frame, like so. And now you'll see if we play the game. Oops, I didn't mean to actually start a new team test. Let's cancel that. Alright, let's wait for that to cancel. Let's go to our normal test and play the game. And you'll see this is our plot now, and if we TP, you see that TP works. If we go far away, we can TP back, and it works. And now we just want to do our normal cell TPs and things like that. So we can say cell TP frame dot button, mouse one click. We want to teleport to our cell TP stand. So if you see seed shop, and we have a TP part right here. So we can say character set primary part C frame. World map stance seed shop or cell shop and the TP part. That's the frame. And we just copy and paste this into the same for our seeds TP frame. Seeds frame, seed shop TP part C frame. One thing I want to note is the reason this works is because TP part is actually a valid child of this model here. So you want to make sure that your organization and hierarchy is always correct, or otherwise it won't work. Now if you play the game, you see that okay, our seeds actually TPs us to the seed shop, and so does the same thing. You notice that it's TPing us sort of like in a weirdly orientated direction. So we can change this as we can go to our seed shop, our TP part, and rotate this around 90 degrees, like so. And the same thing with this 90 degrees. So now if we play the game and we TP, you notice that we're actually facing the right way, like so. And once again, you'll notice that the plots is actually updated. So that's good. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So for the video wrap up, I'm just gonna explain one more time how we organize things and how it works, how we're gonna organize all of our services this go around for the game. So for every service we have, it's gonna be another module script. And here we're just loading and requiring the modules like so. And we're caching the modules, which then we can use again to sort of have a loop around for the recursive issue that we had earlier. And now that we required the modules, we created something called DataService, which handles essentially all of our data loading and things like that, which we got from the ProfileStore. So we made functions called getData, which we then can use from here in order to get our player data. As you can see right here, we have getData, and we incremented or decreased our shekels based on how much we have. And yeah, that's pretty much it. One thing I want to note is if scripts ever get too much, you can always collapse it. So for example, I'm clicking these arrows right here to collapse sort of the functions. So you'll see that, okay, we have get max plots, get plot, get available plots. Whenever our data loads, we assign a plot. And whenever we leave the game, we just clear all of the plot data. Same thing in here, we want to update our Sheckle count. And in here, we want to check when our data loads or when we give money. And I want to note is that our Sheckle count isn't reliant on the leaderstats value, but rather it's reliant on our profile data at Sheckles. The updateSheckleCount is just a visual for the client to know how much Sheckles we have without needing to do fire client, things like that. So the final product should be something. If you play the game, you'll see that, okay, you have our garden. If you TP there, it works. And if you TP to these buttons, it also works. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching, and see y'all in episode 3, which will be something about maybe buying seeds and planting them on your property. So yeah, thank you for watching.